So the country woke up a few days ago to very good news. The government of Guyana had secured, working with the GPSU, an agreement for the increase of public sector wages. But I don't think everyone was happy with the news, particularly the opposition. I think, as we have seen from their hysteric reaction, that they were hoping to, using deceit and falsehoods, mislead public servants in the year 2025 to confront the government of Guyana in a political fashion, not in an industrial way. They had done this in the past, and they were hoping to do that again. They had hoped to do the same with the teachers when they used Coretta McDonald to politicize an industrial dispute and to make some outlandish statements, even racist statements, in relation to that industrial dispute. That matter was settled amicably between the teachers' union and the government of Guyana, which saw a significant increase in teachers' remuneration and the addressing of a large number of issues that had been on the table for negotiations. And so too, this agreement with the GPSU not only dealt with significant salary increases, but also addressed a whole range of allowances and other benefits to public servants. So they were very unhappy, and we saw this reflected in the flurry of activities and press conferences and posts by the opposition, decrying the increase as a pittance, saying we're trying to buy votes. Nigel Yu said we're trying to buy votes. That it's too little too late, that it's a con job. Norton himself said that it was not adequate and it was an insult to public servants. So I'm not going to enumerate all that was said about the salary increases. And then they sought, in a very deceitful manner, to misrepresent their own record in government as one in which the public sector saw massive increases, and that somehow in the 5 years, inclusive of next year, the salary increases for 5 years, that the PPP was shortchanging people in the public sector. So before I address some of the criticisms that they launched or hurled in our direction, let me factually go back through a document that I had made available to the media sometime in the past. And I did not see, particularly the media houses, even in the state sector, I didn't think it was adequately represented, but particularly in the Kaichor News and the Starbuck News and some of the other media that often misrepresent what the policy is, There was no major expression of what we shared, what I shared, because the content of the document I shared would run against the narrative of the opposition and their own narrative that we're shortchanging public servants. So I don't have the luxury as a former finance minister, as a former president, and now someone with responsibilities in a government to deal with, first of all, minutia. That's for the opposition. We have to ensure that the people of this country are aware through the media of the framework in which we operate. And consistent with that need, I want to once again take you through the document that I had presented, but in an updated fashion. And later I will share this document. So it's in black and white, and they can themselves even fact check this, the opposition. They can go to the estimates, they can find out from the Ministry of Finance, and you will see that the numbers I'm presenting here today are an accurate picture of what obtains in the public accounts of the country. So, central government wages in 2020 there are three components of the public sector: central government, public enterprises, and the statutory bodies. Combined, they gave you the public sector. So in the public sector, we have about 70,000 persons in these three categories I just mentioned: the central government, public enterprises, and statutory bodies. About 70,000 people work. The wage bill for the central government aspect in 2020 was $71.8 billion. Today, in 2024, it is with the 10% increase, it will be $121.4 billion. So that's a growth of $49 billion more, $49.6 billion more per year for only those who work in central government. In public enterprises, the wage bill was $16.1 billion in 2020. It's now $24 billion, a $7.9 billion increase, which represents a 49% increase in wages. The statutory bodies, the wage bill was 38.9. It's now $65.2 billion. So for the whole of the public sector, in 2020, the wage bill was $126.8 billion. It's now $210.7 billion per year. That means it's a $83.9 billion more per year that the public sector is currently getting from the government of Guyana in the past 4 years that we've been in office. So this is a significant increase. It means that it is an increase of 66%. The wage bill for the public sector has increased from 2020 to now by 66%. That is from 126 billion to 210 billion dollars. 66% increase in the wage bill for the public sector. If we add the 8% for next year, it will be moved from 126 billion to 227 billion dollars. That means an 80% increase in the wage bill for the public sector for the 5 years under the PPP. Those are the macro figures. So what this means is that every year now, you'll move from 126 to 227 billion dollars. So public servants, the public sector is getting $100 billion more per year now than they were getting in 2020. This works out to $500 million more per year than they were getting in 2020. Per year. It's a recurrent thing. These are the facts of the matter. So I dare any one of them, the Norton or any one of the others, to challenge whether this is factual, whether this is public sector wages bill. So it costs us now $100 billion more per year. And that is what the public sector is getting. So I can go through more details, but I don't want to overload people with figures and for the various components, because already I've lost the entire leadership of APNU and the AFC with just these few figures. So I don't want to confuse them a bit more, but just they can check these figures, because I intend to share this with you and with them. Now they're saying that's a pittance. They're saying that is a pittance. $100 billion increase more per year, from 126 billion in 2020 to 227 billion in 2025 it will be, when we add the 8%. So if that's a pittance for them, well, I don't know what is. So then the next argument is that, first of all, we are treating people at the top unfairly. There are people at the bottom unfairly. So already in the lower end of the public service, our wages are more competitive than the private sector. If you look at the bank now, a bank, their average entry level is between 80,000 to 115,000, 120,000. Our average with these wage increases, our end will be over 100,000 at the minimum. So we've seen people move from many of the banking institutions now are seeking public service jobs, even at the lower end. And some of the people at the lower end, you don't even need any qualification, because, like they're maybe work at public, like cleaners, etc. So already at that level, we are very, very competitive with the private sector. But since they talk about how they love people at the lower end, let us take, for example, under APNU. If you are earning $200,000, which is not a big public servant, $200,000 a month, that's an average thing, because people earn much more now. What percentage salary increases you got under APNU? So you got 5% in 2015, 6% in 2016, 6% in 2017, 6.5% in 2018, and 8.5% in 2019. Those were the years, the 5 years. So that gave you a cumulative sum of about 36% increase in the 5 years if you're earning $200,000 in the public sector as an employee in the public sector. So guess what? In the 5 years, your salary increases was less than the 50% that the ministers took 3 months after they got into office. And you took 5 years of your salary increases at that level, earning $200,000, to get less than what they got when they took office 4 months after the ministers. You remember they gave themselves a 50% increase right at the beginning. So what did they say when they gave themselves? They talk about President Ali's salary now. So Norton said President Ali earns $2.9 million a month, etc. And that people at the bottom gets a lower figure. What does Norton earn in the parliament? So we look at his total monthly allowance, emoluments, and allowances, and it works out to 1.8 million, 337 and 37,000. 1.8 million Norton earns now for doing nothing practically. This excludes from his annual vacation allowance and other annual payments. This is monthly. And he also gets a budget to run his office, running into tens of millions of dollars. This excludes that. That's what Norton gets now. But he complains about everyone else for doing nothing practically, for just walking around the place and being a nuisance. At least Ali is working. So he barefacedly goes on the air and says, look how much money Ali is earning. He's earning over $2 million now. And he is earning $1.8 million a month in emoluments and allowances. This is what Norton gets now. So you remember the arrogance when they took the 50%? You recall that? Let me refresh people's minds, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to rewrite the history and their sordid track record in terms of public sector remuneration. And it was a sad record. So what did Trotman said? It was fair and equitable. Trotman himself said they were not going to approve any increases for themselves, big increases in the year, in 2015. They just got into office. They were saying we were super salaried in 2014. They got into office arguing that we were earning super salaries, and then they proceeded to give themselves 50% increase without, and the same year public servant got 5%, the group I told you. So that is how much they love the public servants. So Trotman himself had said at that time, oh, we were not going to do it. There's some committee working and we're not going to do it. When questioned, he didn't have an answer. He lied to the public. Harman said, I have a staff who's working, when I was in a private sector, working more than this money. So it's unreasonable to expect me to work for less than this, X amount of money. So we have no apology to make. The arrogance of it. No apology to make for taking 50% for yourselves, claiming that we were earning super salary and then giving the public servant, the man who was earning $200,000, 5%. You had no apologies to make. Jordan said, oh, we will be working hard, and this is payment for hard work. So imagine what working. They practically did nothing in the 5 years, just occupied space, including Jordan. But that was hard work, a reflection of their hard work. Like nobody else is working hard. The public servants were now working hard. And then Granger said, it is not selfish or greedy. We are doing this to prevent corruption. He's giving them the 50%. Well, the 50%, they took the 50% and then became the most corrupt government in our whole history. So it was pure nonsense. But that's their track record. They hope we will forget this. And today they come to argue about it. I just went through the magnitude of money going to public sector workers now. So a 10% today on a base of 2023 is equivalent to maybe 3 times the 10% in terms of amount of money on a base like in 2015. It is not just the percentage that you have to look at, as I said before, it is how much money that people get. Because the percentages levied on different base years result in more money, now significant more money, going into people's pockets. The same 10% today would have been, as I said before, maybe 30% of a base year of 2015 in a 1 year increase. So this is totally, I think it shocked them that we could actually pay these issues, their money, and reach agreement. So they have to come up with all sorts of things. How they love public servants, how they did a great job, they didn't take any money for themselves. This is, the 50% is not even inclusive of all the other benefits that they took. Remember, medical, we had to pay for their medical abroad, the ministers and everyone else. I don't even want to go down that route now. It just takes me down a long road of their transgressions and greed. And so today, so Norton, it's not nominal, it is not a pittance, it's a large sum of money. It represents a serious effort on the part of the government to address public servants and their wages. Now, if you look at the elements of what has happened today. So, outside of the wages and salaries, the other benefits now, combined benefits to the public servants, outside of maybe the $5-point-something billion more per year, which represents only the component to public servants, not to like the other sectors of the economy, the joint services, etc. They have another $2 billion that will come to the budget annually, be a recurrent expenditure because of what we did with a series of other allowances. So outside of the salary, the 10%. And if you look at this also was part of the agreement with the teachers. So now they're going to get 100 duty-free vehicles per year. That's a significant amount of duty-free vehicles for certain categories of public servants, nurses, etc. They have increased housing allowance, increased traveling allowance, and an increase in the allowance for higher qualification. The debunching exercise, which moves people up on this scale depending on the years of service they have. All of this is part of the agreement, both with the teachers and with the GPSU. But of course, different sorts of allowance with the two different agreements. And one is a 3 years agreement, like with the teachers, 10, 8, 9, and the GPSU with 10 and 8, 2 years agreement. I think this represents a great advance, and it would help public servants enormously, or teachers enormously. The agreement with GAU too, we're very pleased about that. It was a 3 years agreement, 10, 8, 9 increase. And this comes after an unconscionable freezing of wages for the sugar workers for all 5 years that APNU was in office. The sugar workers not only got their 7,000 of them laid off, that was one of the consequences of APNU in office, but they did not get a single salary increase for the 5 years that APNU was in office. So their 2015 salary was the same as their 2020 salary. That is what happened to APNU, unconscionable. And so now they increased too. We've had an agreement with GAU, and those sugar workers now would also benefit from this agreement. We're hoping that we will continue to work with the other unions to conclude agreements of a similar nature. For the rest of the public servants, if we do not have any agreement with their unions, the 10% increase that we have given to the GTU and to the GAU and to the GPSU will be paid out to those others in the public sector. They will also benefit from the 10% for this year. So this is something that is a great movement forward. It recognizes the role that our public servants play. It treats them with respect. And APNU is just like sour about this all. They're not happy. They're hoping to have major industrial problems next year, election year. They're not happy that this has happened. And you see that reflected in the sour comments that they make every single day, their panic comments, being inconsistent with their own history, lying blatantly about what they did in government and the impact on people. Now, one thing that public servants can say too, like with other people in this country. So outside of being treated well by the government, and in terms of what I just said to you, I spoke to you about the macro sums, 500 million US more per year in the pockets of public sector workers under this government than in 2020. That's indisputable. So what else do public servants get now that they wouldn't have gotten under the APNU? So many of them now get a chance, like with every other citizen, to apply for and get a house lot in real terms. Not like APNU, in the 5 years they practically did nothing, no spending on developing housing, and so except for a couple of maybe 1,000, 2,000 house lots after the no confidence motion without putting in any infrastructure, just allocating it to people. We're spending $232 billion on developing 40,000 house lots and another $50 billion next year. That will be $282 billion. And some public servants, not all, but some public servants will also benefit from that. They got a real possibility of owning a plot of land because this government sees that as a priority for our people too. So public servants can also benefit from that, and many are benefiting. Public servants can now go back to their homes and in their villages and drive on highways that when they have a vehicle and not spend hours on the road. Well, maybe we still have congestion, but it would have been infinitely worse if we hadn't built these highways. But they go back to their communities now whether they live in Buxton, Annandale, Crabwood Creek, or in Mabaruma or Port Kaituma or any part of this country. And they have better roads to drive on. They're better conditions. In every village, you see it happening. In Georgetown, you see the improvement of the road network. So that's an investment in their improvement of their living conditions too. So, and billions being spent there to do that. The public servants now can join up to a gold scholarship program or go in without having to pay a cent for a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or even a doctorate. We can get it for free, and university education will be free next year. They're benefiting from that too. Public servants are going to benefit from the cash grant, the 100,000 cash grant, like with everyone else. The public servants will benefit significantly from the 12 new hospitals or the improvement of healthcare generally that we are building across the country. The joint services, if you're a public service in there, you got your 1 month tax-free bonus that APNU took away. 1 month salary, you got it back. If you're a public servant and you have kids, like with every other family that have kids, you're now getting back the cash grant that the children have. So when you look at the framework, this bunch of gangsters, like in the APNU and AFC, they don't talk about, they don't want you to remember all of that. They don't want you to remember that they put the taxes on data. So when you were using your cell phone under APNU, you had to pay taxes on the data that you use for your cell phone, and that we removed. I don't want you to remember that. Or that now, even now, with all the problems with electricity and water and transport, that every time you buy a gallon of gasoline, you're getting a $500 Ghana subsidy per gallon of gasoline or diesel. They don't want you to think about that. You're getting benefits from other things outside of your wages and salaries that were not there under APNU. So this is the framework we're saying, not just wages and not just public servants, but people across, in other sectors, in the private sector, in other areas, they too benefit from some of these initiatives. Or the farmers or the fishermen or the sugar workers, they too can get a scholarship or they go get the cash grant, etc. This is the framework we have. And so when I listen to these people, you then know that they are desperate. They have nothing absolutely to talk about. Absolutely nothing to talk about. So they continue to lie and make outlandish promises that they never had they never kept in the past, and they have no intention to keep. It's just to dupe people once again, like what they did in 2015, and then the arrogance when they got into government, as reflected by the no apology for their 50% increase. But in their whole term, they didn't give 50% increase to any other group of people. So the duplicity of it all now is that I've seen comments from them to say, oh, Jagdeo is not speaking the truth, that the cash grant would be inflationary. So first of all, they argue the cash grant that we're giving out is not enough. We're doing too little. They calculate how much per day it costs and stuff. The 100,000 is not enough. They took away from the children 10,000, but they're complaining about this. So first, it's not enough. And then they're saying, oh, they shouldn't be spending so much because it will be inflationary. It will increase the cost of living. So you have to make up your mind. Are you in favor of the cash grant or not? Because You can't then come and say it's too little, pay more, and then on the other hand say this little is too inflationary. That is what they do all the time, and people, I don't know if they don't recognize that the people of this country will see through this duplicity. Or maybe they don't recognize this themselves, that they're talking a load of nonsense. But, and so the same thing now, that their wages are too low this year, but it will be inflationary. It will increase cost of living because people are going to see the higher wages and raise prices. Sometimes people do that, some of the unscrupulous businessmen. Like we've been looking at some of the things at the market. Like one, like 30 pounds, $30 per pound cassava in Region 3. You buy it from the farmers. Monrepo Market, it was sold for $100. The same pound of cassava. We're looking at some of these things and many other areas. I don't want to get into the detail. The same thing with chicken prices. They vary. But people do that culturally. Not that it should happen, because there is no shortage on the supply side. It's just that they believe when you pay out more money in the public sector that maybe you should they should raise their prices. We know about that culturally, but you can't be for higher wages and at the same time say the little what you are paying out is too inflationary, but we want more paid out, and then complain, well, it's going to impact cost of living. How do you do those two things? The same thing with wages and salaries now and with a cash grant. So yes, you have more money in the system. That's what we've always said, that we have to look at the inflationary impact of putting more money into the system without tackling some of the fundamentals, without freeing up, getting a greater supply response. I explained to you how we stimulated a supply response in the past through the production of stone, the aggregates. Aggregate prices were like $11,000 when we got into office. It went to $18,000 per ton. We gave out a number of quarry licenses. You had 6 new quarries. They started producing. Now the prices come down to $10,000 per ton of aggregate. So because we stimulated a supply response, we work all the time on other matters like that. We tighten sometimes a bit monetary policy. So we are looking at it, and we are concerned about it. But we can't go and say, oh, we're not going to pay the public servants more because we're worried, or their salaries, because we're just worried about the inflationary impact. They want us to pay a higher percentage now, but said, oh, you got to be concerned about the cost of living. This government not controlling the cost of living. And not recognizing what we have done on 5 of the 6 major components that drive cost of living. I went through them in the past. The utility bills, the electricity, water, internet, mortgage payments, and of course transport costs, which is the subsidizing of fuel at the pump. Those are the key major movers of price that impact on the budget of families, etc. So this is a whole bunch of duplicity that you see here. Oh, we want more money, but you should be worried about inflation, the cost of living. But we want more paid, because it's all political. They don't have a framework. It's not a framework. And in any case, if you handed them a framework, they wouldn't even know what to do with it. So this is one thing all week they've been at since the agreement came out with the government and the GPSU. Another issue that they've been at from last week is the NRF And so this one originates from the impact of the cash grant. So they are going crazy with their cash grant. They walk around, they're haunted. They go every place to the site, they try to run it down, they try to identify problems where there are not problems. We acknowledge that this is a major undertaking with limited resources where people are stretched because the Ministry of Finance that manages this has to prepare the budget for 2025. We know it's going to cause some problems for some people where if the enumerator doesn't show up on time, early enough, if large numbers of people show up, that they may have difficulty registering as quickly as we would like. But the performance has been variable. There's some people who get through quickly, some have to wait a little bit longer. We've given clarity on shut-ins that eventually people who can't come, we will have to visit them in their homes so that they're not excluded. If people miss this exercise, they're not going to lose the money. They are still going to have, they're going to have opportunities to come and register afterwards. For example, if they're working elsewhere, etc., and they miss the period in which we're doing the registration in their villages or in their communities, then they can come later. We have made it clear that we will address issues that arise from time to time, so as to ensure that everyone gets this. We said to people, be patient a bit, and we understand everyone wants the money, but we've been realistic about it. We said, to do this properly, we need several months. We've already started on it. Some people have received payments. We are registering others. It will take a few months. We said further that if we don't complete the exercise within the prescribed period, there is no outward, like we were examining, like 4 or 5 months to complete it, that will not be an issue. We can accommodate people. So we've given almost all of the assurances to people. And most importantly, we said to people, please go through this exercise now so we can create a proper database, because you would not have to go through it again. Once we have this database, anytime there are future cash payments to be made, we would have a verified database now. So I see APNU saying, end the registration, use the existing databases. They're the same ones who said, we cross-reference now using the voters list, but the voters list is bad. Use that. But I suspect what they want is confusion. They want to identify some corruption in it where a person gets 2 payments in a bank account, and then they'd say, oh, PPP corruption. They don't want to go through this important verification process. So then they can claim that the exercise is flawed. First, they said, remember they said we're collecting the information for elections, for electoral purposes. Well, people laughed at them. Nobody believed them, including in their support base, because people see through this bullshit that they've been going on with all the time. And it's only that. I can't find another word to call it, because that's the only thing you can call it. It's so, every week it's the same thing. Oh, the PP trying to rig elections, etc. When they're the biggest riggers. Then the biggest riggers they can give technical assistance to other countries to rig. They're so proficient at this, the PNC and AFC. Proficient. But they blundered in 2020. They blundered, and bit clumsy in 2020, but they know how to rig. So it's pure nonsense. So now they want us to stop the exercise, just pay out the money, and then they will come and say, oh, you paid out to they're going to find one man whose name is Lal Bachchan, and then they would say, oh, you gave Lal Bachchan 2 checks, consistent with the racism, you know? And then they would make that an issue. So they're looking to, they can't fight this initiative. They have to just make it look flawed. Now recognizing the importance of it and how much time it takes to deliver on a major initiative that will end up with the citizens of this country getting over $60 billion in their pockets, and every person over 18 years old getting $100,000. So they can talk till they go blue. We are now going to stop going through this proper verification process, and our aim is to get this money to everyone. They want, first of all, it's going to be inflationary. Jordan talking about inflationary impact and all of that nonsense here. Yeah, so what? Should we stop paying it because it's going to be inflationary? Or is it inflationary? I said it, the one-off nature could be accommodated in the framework. But no, the duplicity again. And then now they come up with something else, stop it all. So this is in a tangential way, it is related. This fear of the payout, the panic over the payout, like with the public servants' wages, is triggering a whole range of public commentary coming from their quarters now to try to undermine the initiative. And what is the gist of, or the zeitgeist of what they're saying? It is that, oh, oil money is not transparently spent. That is the way they can sort to undermine this cash grant initiative. So oil money is not transparently spent, and they roll out their acolytes to carry that view all week long. It was about the NRF. So last week I was asked about the need or the desirability of enumerating every expenditure in the budget that will be funded from the transfers from the NRF to the budget. I was asked about that, and I pointed out, first of all, it's not a requirement of the law, and it would be very difficult to do so. But that we have vastly enhanced the transparency surrounding the use of oil money, and the changes that we have made in the NRF, we are acting pursuant to those changes in compliance with the law. So that was my contention. So Kite Show News and the others, particularly Kite Show News, made it look like, oh, I'm saying it's difficult to say where oil money is going. Because not that I said that every cent has to be appropriated, but that because somehow the money is disappearing somewhere. So may I just once again, for those people that I'll come to in a moment, who are talking about transparency surrounding the use of oil money, and I see they rolled out Jordan again, a failure in that period. I saw him talking about oh, this ratio and that ratio. And I was in Parliament, I said one time that we kept him on when we got into office, not because of his special skill, but out of charity. And also, he used to draft like bits of paper for me and thought that, you know, you collect the growth in revenue from 5%, etc., and thought that was fundamental work, like budget time, they draft, oh, the revenue increased by 12% over the last year, etc. That was not fundamental work. He was never part of the policy-making circles from 1992 to 2015, never was in the room where the policy was made. I can say in every single budget from 1992 to 2014, I think it was, because 2015 the elections had changed, every single budget, I sat in the room either with the president or being the president, with Chetty Jagan and with Janet Jagan and Samuel Hines and with Donald Ramatar, or as president for 12 years, where policy was discussed, budget policy. And let me give you a couple of examples. We insisted that we are managing for people, not ratios. The people like Jordan who were trained, they look for a pat on the head from Washington and from the IMF and the others because they are measuring ratios. What is this to GDP? You know, the fiscal deficit to the GDP, and they have to clear it with Washington, and the size of the debt to GDP ratio. We don't never manage for ratios. We manage for transformation and for impact on people. And that's something fundamentally different than for those people who are trained to be bureaucrats who can crunch the numbers. Often they can't see big picture. And that's the problem with people like Jordan. Can't crunch. They can't do that. So again, our budget is for people. They don't see that. The people, the center of all these measures. So why do you think Jordan increased all these taxes? $90 billion per year on the APNU. Putting tax on baby milk and on hinterland travel and on the mining sector and on data. He didn't care about its impact. Or taking away the children's grant, arguing they couldn't find the money to pay that, but they could find the money to fund a 50% increase for the ministers. Because they're now managing for people, so it didn't matter. These children, take away their money from them. He was one who was, remember, putting VAT on education and health services until we protested. So if you go to the doctor, you would have had to pay VAT on the consultation fees and everything else. Same thing he was doing for education. We fought it off in opposition. The people, they manage for ratio. So at the end of the year, his fiscal deficit, I saw him talking about fiscal deficit and the magnitude of the deficit and all of that. So he could have ended up the year with a formula which says, fiscal deficit is 5% of GDP, and get a pat on the head from the IMF. So Kartak had done a study when I was a sensitivity analysis when I was president to say for us to have revenue neutrality in the implementation of the value-added tax when we are moving from getting rid of the excise tax and consumption tax and several other taxes and subsuming those under a value-added tax, that we had to do a 16% VAT across the board on education, on health, on water, on electricity, on everything else. So I said as president, that's never going to happen here. The technical study you did, first of all, I think you have it wrong. And secondly, we're never going to, as president, I'm never going to implement value-added tax on foodstuff so that a food, basic food would have the same tax as chocolate if you bring in chocolate into the country. It didn't impact on the poverty reduction objectives and people. And so we did not agree to that. We did not agree to the implementation on VAT on basic food, on water and electricity, etc. Soon as he got back into office, they dusted out the Carter study. Well, they got back into office. They got in 2015. He dusted out the old study and implemented it because they slavishly followed the Washington consensus. That's why they're incapable of creating a framework where people matter. And so when I hear him talk and sounding, oh, this ratio and that ratio, I use it sometimes, but I don't lose sight that people are the subject of your budget and your policy making, not ratios. And that could explain all that they did. How could a sensible man or any minister of finance who talks about long-term growth, in 5 years that you're in office, increase the recurrent budget by maybe 70%, and the capital budget in which you build the productive capability of the economy, schools, hospitals, roads, city defenses, etc., it was lower than 2014. You don't put money into the budget, but you increase taxes per year by $90 billion. You take it all and eat it up. Put it somewhere else, it disappears, but you couldn't put it in infrastructure that will safeguard the future of our people, better education, health facilities, as well as stimulate future growth in the economy. That's what he did. A failure as a minister. And he runs around, and he could only be the technical person for the people who are dumb. I see the questions they ask him. They don't get robustly pushed on these matters. So they go and pronounce. And it's a bunch of nonsense. But I will come back to the class that he belongs to a little bit later when I address this issue. So let me go back to tell you what sort of arrangement, since they're talking about the NRF. I come back to the NRF. So what did we do when we got into office? So the first thing, let me tell you what we did legislatively to improve transparency in the NRF. We remove any spending on the fund without parliamentary approval. So under his model, Jordan's model, the PNC model, you could have gone and spent money from the NRF without parliamentary approval. There were direct charges on the fund. We removed that. Secondly, we said you have to publish all receipts to the fund in the official gazette and notify Parliament within 3 months of receipt. And if you don't, the Minister of Finance could be charged and there will be a 10 years jail penalty attached to this. If Jordan was the Minister of Finance, he would have been in jail in accordance with that provision, if we had that provision under APNU. Because you remember the signing bonus, which under the law says should be deposited in the fund, was kept in, not in the consolidated fund, not in the balance sheet of the central bank, but a separate account. But in the NRF law, that money should have been paid, if they had it at that time, should have been paid directly into the NRF. Kept it outside. Guess what? He denied its existence when asked by reporters, and then subsequently said they kept it outside because they thought it was a gift to the government of Guyana. I can find you direct quotations from him saying that he thought it was a gift. That was the minister. This was the great transparency we had around oil receipts. Great transparency. Today, no country in the world has that provision. Every time you receive a payment, it goes to go in the official gazette, Parliament notified, and if three months pass, you can charge the minister 10 years in jail. Not on the APNU. That would have never found any expression in any law that they pass. Next is that we introduce a board of directors. So under the law on that Jordan and the others passed, guess who had the powers to manage the fund? The central bank at the direction of the Minister of Finance, Jordan. So he had powers to manage this whole fund. So guess what we did? He complains about the board of directors now. I see all of them complaining. I'll come to one called Terence Campbell later who complained about this. But the board of directors, they don't have enough information, as somehow this board of directors is less transparent, that's what they're arguing, than the powers that the minister has vested in him. And look at the people on the board of directors. See who they are, and I want you to do your homework and you will see who they are. They're people with more integrity in a little finger than Jordan and all of the others combined, the Campbells and everyone else. So somehow they're making it seem as though the board of directors to manage the fund is less transparent than the minister having all the power. We introduced the board. So they're saying, the president shouldn't appoint the board, but who appoints the minister? The president would appoint the minister, and he alone was there had management responsibilities for the fund. So we can all agree as a country that this was a great change that we made to enhance transparency. The third issue was we simplified the formula for transfer. So they had all of these committees, a fiscal committee, a macroeconomic committee, but at the end of the day, the amount that would have been transferred every year from the NRF to the budget would have come not based on a formula, would have been based on the discretion or the judgment of the Minister of Finance. So he could decide one year, I want all the money to come in. Another year, I want only 5%. The Minister of Finance, in his sole discretion, would have decided how much money will move from the NRF to the budget. That was changed to a formula now. The formula is predictable, everybody knows it. The minister doesn't have any discretion no longer. The formula sets the upper limit. There was no upper limit to withdraw any money under the minister's discretion. No upper limit whatsoever. He could have drawn all of the money. We set an upper limit, so still allowing room to save in the fund. So you can agree with me that you would want the formula in our law to determine the transfer than Jordan or any minister. That is infinitely more transparent now if we're talking about transparency. And we put a simple formula. We have the Public Accountability and Oversight Committee that does a report that goes directly to the Speaker. You have already the Board of Directors. They do a report that the Minister tables in the Parliament. This was the last report from the Board of Directors for 2023. it went to Parliament on the fund itself. So all of these things have been done, and now clearly every cent has to be appropriated by the Parliament. So I can go on to talk about the changes to the law and the improvement. So we can all recognize that the PNC model was a model to keep stealing the money, as they sought to do with the 18 million, because they didn't have to put the money in, and two, to charge expenditures directly on the fund without any approval from Parliament. They had direct charges. And three, the minister could have transferred all the money from the fund with no upper limit in his own discretion or judgment, not based on a formula or the law. That was the PNC model. That has changed. The law, that is why the law and the amendments got international recognition and praise. So that's the first thing. So let's talk a bit about how the fund works, and so that I'll come to the criticism later. So the law says approval of withdrawals from fund. The amount that the minister shall request the National Assembly to approve as the withdrawal from the fund for the next ensuing fiscal year shall be included in the annual budget proposal and shall not exceed for that year the ceiling calculated in accordance with Section 17 and the first schedule. So the formula can't exceed that, but the minister in his annual budget has to say how much money he wants consistent with that formula. He could argue for a lower sum, but he can't exceed the ceiling established by the formula. He can't say, I want all the money. Okay? So, did the minister comply with this in his budget speeches? So it says, for example, here, content of the annual budget proposal in Section 21 of the law. The annual budget proposal shall include 1, a detailed estimate of petroleum revenues for the next ensuing fiscal year and each of the next following 3 fiscal years. 2, an estimate of the withdrawal from the fund for the next ensuing fiscal year and each of the following years. I can read out all of them. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conditions that the budget proposal for the withdrawal must have in the budget. Did we comply with that? Look at table in the estimates. Look at table, the appendix 7. And you will see that here it says petroleum revenue deposits, government share of profit oil, royalties, nominal return, the interest income and capital gains, outflows, withdrawal amount, opening balance of the NRF, closing balance of the MRF, and the memorandum item, which is withdrawal ceiling. It complies with every one of the provisions in the law. So we follow the law. The minister presents this to the National Assembly. The National Assembly then passes a resolution like they did, and the resolution this year says, further resolve that this National Assembly approved the sum of $208 billion, equivalent to 1. This was the year before, the resolution from the year before. To be withdrawn from the Natural Resources Fund for the financial year 2023 in accordance with the Natural Resources Fund Act. So let's decipher all of this. So first of all, the law says that there is a formula. The Minister of Finance must, in his budget every year, in the annual budget that is presented to the Parliament, he has to ensure that there is a budget proposal for the withdrawal of funds. He needs to say the amount, and then he needs to comply with the things that I just mentioned. Forecast for 3 years, nominal rate of return for the 3 years ahead, how much he anticipates to withdraw from the fund for the next 3 years. All of that has been complied with. It's in a table in the Parliament. The Parliament then goes through every expenditure of the budget, approves the budget expenses, that expenditure for every cent spent in the budget, approves a appropriation act, then if necessary supplementary appropriation act, but in this case an appropriation act, then passes a specific resolution debated and voted on in the Parliament how much money needs to come from the fund to the Treasury, and only then you can then start withdrawing. So clearly, the only section of the law where it says what Dennis Chabrol asked me about last week, about detailing what you are spending the money for. So outside of this annual withdrawal, which is captured by a ceiling now and a formula, and this is the process that you have to go through, the government can draw down money for one specific additional purpose. That's in case we have a national emergency. For example, a major flood disaster or a tsunami. Well, a tsunami, and we want to draw down money for this. So in that case, there is no ceiling, but you have to now, you can't go and say, oh, I'm forecasting. You have to give the projects and the specific use of the fund if you trigger that provision of the law. That provision has never been triggered. Never been triggered, because we have never utilized money under that head. So that's the only case where you have to detail the expenditure made from the oil revenue to have the withdrawal done. Now they talk about who establishes the national development priorities. Oh, any clown would know it is the national development priorities of the government is reflected in its annual budget, which is approved by Parliament. Parliament determines that, not the NRF members of the board or Terence Campbell from the investment committee. It's the Parliament, the people who are elected by the people of the country, not an opposition representative to the investment committee. It's the people's representative in Parliament through a budgetary process that identifies the development priorities of the year. The budget is a reflection of the development priorities. So this is the basic stuff. That's what the law says. Now, every cent has to be paid into the consolidated fund. I see some in the letters and the articles, they said we must put this, I think it's from the same Terence Campbell, that we must put this in an account in the central bank and all of that. That's nonsense. I'm not going to deal with those issues now. So clearly, they want to give to the board of directors a few people appointed by the president or by the leader, in this case, the leader of the opposition's nominee, to act outside the law. The law, we're in full compliance with the law. Now, every cent of this money is audited and goes through the appropriation process. It's arrogance. They want to take on this themselves. So under the guise of accountability, that somehow they are the ones most concerned about this issue. So let me come to their criticism. So Nigel Yu says Jagdeo's statement on showing how oil money is spent is a reckless admission of gross disregard to prudent management of Guyana. Nigel Hughes would not know about prudent management of Guyana or anything else, given the track record of his party, even if it bites him in the ass. I said this before. Prudent management, look at their track record. What sort of prudent management is he talking about? They're a failure as a party, his party and the PNC. They've never created value for this country. You look at their record after 28 years in government. We're the poorest country in the hemisphere. McIntyre said that. Has he ever read McIntyre, former Secretary General of CARICOM? After 28 years in government, you will ended up with the poorest country in the hemisphere based on your prudent management of Guyana and its resources. And the 5 years you didn't fare much better. Are more concerned about corruption, ministers giving themselves contract in their own ministry than anything else. What was prudent management about the agreement with Exxon? So he speaks about that. Then I hear legal action looms over NRF's opaque transfer of oil revenues. So another point, let me deal with the other point before I come to one crucial point. So the other point is their lament that there's not enough money to manage in the investment committee. So I think it comes out of they believe that the 60 billion going to our people is wasted. That is people like Campbell and the others. So we must give him the money to manage, or the committee to manage. But people don't have roads to drive on. We're putting too much in infrastructure. They don't have a proper electricity up to this point. We must now fix it. The foolishness of this position. Oh, the government is not saving, and they use words like intergenerational equity. And they're concerned about this windfall being squandered and about the long-term future of this country. And it's all hogwash, as far as I'm concerned. Hogwash. So, Norway, that started off with a higher level of development when it found oil, did not start saving a cent of the oil money until 25 years after it was producing oil. We already started saving, but the magnitude is not great. It will grow over the years, and as the revenue grows significantly, which will happen in a couple of years' time, so too will be the magnitude of the savings, and there would be substantial amounts of saving. But we started right at the beginning, from the day we started producing. So they will tell you about how great Norway has done. But we must put the money and to invest, give them to invest in something else when our people still need investments in their livelihoods. And it's not like it's money that can fund the entire budget. It's only 30% of the budget all the oil money can fund. So it is not like it's even funding 100% of the budget and we're expanding beyond that. But it's this sort of arrogance. They would go and talk about Norway and they'd do a conference about Norway and how these people can do something. But here, people, oh, we want to manage it, and I'm concerned about the future. The board signs a blank check with each withdrawal. This is the article, dear editor. I see here by Mr. Terence Campbell. So let me come to him. So he, of course, the usual nonsense about intergenerational transfer. Concern about intergenerational transfer, people should pay their taxes. That the national patrimony is at risk. The national patrimony was at risk when his friends were in government. He didn't have a word to say when they signed the agreement with ExxonMobil. That was the biggest sellout of the national patrimony. Not a word then, but he's concerned about the national patrimony being at risk, and he is the sole voice to safeguard the national patrimony. Not the members of the National Assembly, not the Auditor General, not the Oversight Committee, not the board, members of the Board of Directors. They're all rubber stamps. But that's his responsibility for national patrimony. Secondly, so he says, I read an article where he says that he's an independent voice, the independent voice. In the past, when he got selected to go to the investment committee. But he's not so independent. This is another pretense. People who are intensely political to gain some sort of acceptance and credibility, they portray themselves as erudite and independent. So let's examine how independent he is. He was nominated. He's the opposition, PNC's nominee to the investment committee. But I recall when I look, I don't pay too much attention to Terence Campbell and the Campbells and the others. But there are a couple of things I looked at. When I saw this, I recall when he resigned from ANO. I recall that because we were, I think, in opposition. And he was concerned, the APNU people criticized him because he was in ANO. And he made a post. So I got my people to download it so we could see, the country could see how independent this independent person is. So this is how it starts. Today, a knife was stuck into my back by my own people. I have supported the PNC, APNU, AFC in every general election since I started voting. And now he's no spring chicken. I think he's wrong my age, or even, I don't know if he's older. So that's a very long time. I don't know if in the period when they were rigging elections too, he used to vote. So since he started voting, Carl Greenidge, Raphael Trotman, Cathy Hughes, Rupert Rupner, and Lance Kirby can attest it. This support ran into millions of dollars. Then, I'm not going to go read through the whole thing. Then, my entry into politics was purely to deny the PPP a majority. His entry into politics, so he joined ANOG, to deny the PPP a majority. This is coming from the donkey's mouth. So, there's this very independent man whose sole purpose in life is to deny the PPP a majority. Very, very independent. Then it goes on in the same thing. There are independent observers who believe the coalition should resign based on convention, but fail to recognize that there is no precedent for a similar vote by an assembly made up of 40% disqualified members. Now, he's talking about the dual citizens, but the fact of the matter is that he was defending the APNU's position not to comply with the no confidence motion. This is the independent person that we're talking about. So, first of all, he's independent. He wants us to take away the responsibility of oversight and determining the national development priorities which are done in the budget from members of the National Assembly and give it to them, to him and the others, so that once the members of the National Assembly decide how much money should be transferred, then he can block it there. 2, this is a great governance model that he wants, undermining the elected leaders, and he's concerned about intergenerational equity and not having enough money to invest. So forget spending on people, etc. Just give them the money to invest. Spend all of the money there. So I would not have dealt much with this issue. But the reason I wanted to talk about a person like Campbell, because normally I don't pay much attention. So in his letter to the the Starbuck News, that was published in the Starbuck News, he said, the Vice President has a genetic predisposition to eating his cake and having it. So he's talking about my genetic predisposition. Now, my genes come from my parents. So he's either saying my parents are duplicitous, or I think more broadly, he's talking about Indo-Guyanese, because I see a pattern here. So Nigel Hughes reposted the same thing, my genetic predisposition. And I saw Jordan said something along the similar line, as though it's coordinated, that we believe only one type of people can manage the country. So this view exists in, I think, in what I said before, the urban elite. It's a racist view. Just imagine if I were to say that he is genetically predisposed to evading taxes, or something of that sort. They would have made a big issue already that I'm racist. Yes, this passed off. And it got published in the newspaper. that I am genetically predisposed to basically lying. And so, let me tell people like Terence Campbell and the others, I am proud of who I am with my gene pool. I'm extremely proud who I am. I'm a rural person. I grew up on the East Coast, and my parents were simple people. And I think they passed on to me the capacity to treat others with respect and also to work hard to achieve things in life. But they also gave me, I think genetically, the predisposition to recognize bullshit when I see it. And they also, so I can recognize useless people, the pretend sophisticates, who believe often that by sipping wine, not that there's anything wrong in sipping wine and discussing Chaucer or Keats or someone else, a great poet from the Middle Ages or Shakespeare, that they are somehow better than others, because I see through all of that. And I think I'm genetically predisposed to call them out for what they are. They're hollow, fake intellectuals with a great deal of pretense, and they are not happy. They lose ground, particularly when people poke beyond this sophisticated veneer that they cultivate over the years. Where they have vacations and they talk about that, and with whom they mingle and stuff like that. I have, in my lifetime, I'm proud of what I've achieved. In my 20s, I became a minister. 35, I became the president of this country. I've gone through a whole range of things. So I've dealt with almost everything around the world, met leaders, etc. But that doesn't change who I am. And I can spend my genetic predisposition, I can spend all day of my life talking to a farmer, a sugar worker, a bauxite worker, a taxi driver, and I will gain more from them, from these fake people like Campbell and the others. So I'm not going to go into what he said here today. So who is more fake than a pretend independent who said his only reason for him to enter into politics was to keep the PPP out of office? Who is more fake than that? And with Nigel Hughes, he repeated it, Nigel Hughes, because it comes from the same group that they hang out with. And frankly speaking, it's not that, Jordan, when we say that you're hopelessly managed the economy, it's not about Afro-Guyanese. We have, in our government, we have a ton of efficient people, and there are tons of efficient Afro-Guyanese. We don't talk like that. We're talking about the useless pretense that we, like you and the others. Not one group of people. For them, everything is about race. You have thousands of Afro-Guyanese who never got a chance on them, who are capable and could manage anything in the world. And they're demonstrating this. Not you. Don't rub your feces on other people. That's what they do. And to create this air, it's a racist comment. It is whistleblowing, the racist whistleblowing. But they are useless, so they want to elevate it to a whole class of people. Now, this is the same person, I think, complained when somebody said about rigging is in a particular DNA, some Afro-Saxon DNA. He was complaining about Terence Campbell, maybe rightfully so. But today, he says, It's my genetic predisposition that made me, oh, I'm a liar or something like that. My genetic predisposition. I'm proud of who I am, and I don't have any chip on my shoulder for these pretend fake intellectuals, because they can't. Half of them can't run cake shop as Nigel Hughes has demonstrated. He doesn't know anything. All this big facade about in court. You see him floundering every week on any policy issue. Hopeless. Even Jordan in he said, according to Jordan, the board cannot tell the government when to withdraw and how much to withdraw. Even Jordan gave a comment like that, but Terence Campbell wants that done, because Jordan probably may have read the law. So I don't, that is all I'm going to say about the NRF this week and these fake intellectuals, etc. Now the same thing, as if not enough, that's why it's coordinated. And it all started because they don't like the cash grant. They don't want it done. So they're trying to undermine the spending. So I looked at the Starbuck News, and the Starbuck News has several editorials this week. Cash grant rollout, a failure of leadership. Well, it's not a failure of leadership. It's giving money to people. This is the same kind of arrogant, elitist sort of thing. It's a failure of leadership if it doesn't get your approval. It's going to result in, in fact, it's leadership that is responsive to the needs of the people of this country. It is going to result in the people of this country getting over $60 billion more. Then another one about the president's decision making in relation to the same cash grant. So 3 editorials this week to buttress and to support the undermining of the cash grant initiative, and to lend support to these fake intellectuals that have been making comments all week about this matter. So in the third editorial, it speaks about royalties for everyone and praises Suriname, how Suriname has a great model, etc. You ask the people of Suriname what they think of it. So, all to undermine what we are doing here. So, the Ali administration has stormed pell-mell into massive expenditure and infrastructure without any structured attention to the basic needs of a large segment of the population, which has been punishing under the daily burden of meeting ends meet, cost of living again. So again, they have this big beef with public spending on infrastructure. We must not spend on infrastructure, but we must create a more comfortable economy. We must create a vision for the future, but don't spend on infrastructure. And the cost of living issue, they come back to it, but they haven't answered one key question, the Starbuck News. Which country in the world has done what we have done, and the 4 areas outlined as I outlined at the beginning? I don't want to repeat them. Not a word about that. Not an acknowledgement of it. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. How much it costs. So not a word about that. Again, coming back with their old mantra. Warn, etc. Not only did the government fix its own formula for withdrawal from the NRF, so what was the App News formula? And whose formula would we fix? It's Starbuck News formula? So effectively emasculating its board. So we emasculated the board there, as though the people, the elected leaders, must now have a say over this. And then they come back with the intergenerational equity. I made that point already. it's a set of things that have been answered 100 times before. So all week long they've been at it. All week long, every person who was weighed in has just come in, and the Nigel Hughes and the others have just enjoyed themselves the whole week. I was tempted earlier in the week to tackle it, but I saw other people have been dealing with this matter, so I did not join in too much there. Especially, you should read when Nigel Hughes, I don't know if he had, this guy thinks before he talks or posts stuff, but he said the $5 billion in oil money is missing. And I just want to, normally I will draw a post that Joel Bagwandin made to your attention. So he first of all said that they blocked him from their page, AFC. And then I'm just going to read small snippets of it for you to understand. He is saying that they're divorced from reality because they don't even look at the numbers. That they are devious because Nigel Hughes asked, where is the 5.4 billion, as though it's missing. It's missing money that we've collected so far. And this is what he says here. As of September 2024, the NRF balance was $3.2 billion. That's money in the NRF. So right away, 60% of the money we have earned to date from oil resources remains untouched. It's in the account. So he asked, where is the money, the 5.4, but 60% is there. We have only spent 2.2 billion so far, or 40%, right, or so. That is, and Nigel Hughes asks, oh, the money is missing. Doesn't even know that in the NRF balance that you have 60% of all the money we have collected, and only 40% has been spent so far. Could have, the 40% that's spent, it's through an appropriation process by Parliament. It's not missing money. Right? And you can go on because the point is made that we've collected in the same period more than we've collected in non-oil revenue, more than from oil revenue in the same period. We have, every cent is audited by the Auditor General. So the money can't be missing. And then he asked about some serious questions too. If you're talking about missing money, what about the 18 million bonus? Did you get an explanation from Jordan? There are lots of things here. I don't want to go through about missing money because a lot of those would happen on the afternoon. It might take me all afternoon. But just read that. Clung post by Nigel Hughes. A clung post, and Bagwandin wiped the floor with him. You know, the guy does not, when you're a leader of a party, you have to be sensible about the things you post. You know, make a post and you don't even have, Terence Campbell should have told him what to write, because I see he's repeating what Terence Campbell is saying, the cabal. So, just to give you an idea about that issue. So let me move on to another theme now. This week, we have seen frenzied activities again surrounding meetings among political parties. All week, people are meeting. So last week, I made it clear that I talk about the 0 plus 0 is 0, and I still believe that. So ANOG met with AFC, PNC meeting with WPA, all big press releases this year. AFC meeting with GAP, AFC meeting with APNU in New York, no photo. AFC meeting with the Equality and Justice Party, Jaipal Sharma. So all of this during the week. So I don't know what, first of all, let me talk about the ANOG meeting with the AFC. So ANOG was meeting with the AFC, and I saw a news story that came out about 10 o'clock in the morning saying they were meeting to talk about different things, maybe collating. And then by the end of the afternoon, I saw some posts by Mark France that he had invited all the parties. He is inviting all the parties, or he wants to meet with all the parties. And he posted some pictures of himself at Freedom House delivering a letter. So I asked my staff, what time from office of the president, I was there, what time did he deliver the letter? And they said, just after 1 on Monday, the same day he was meeting with AFC at 2 o'clock. And he delivered the letter here at 1 o'clock, after the news story came out that he was meeting with them. I think this was to cover up that. It was to just come here and drop a letter off to us because he wanted it after his meeting with the AFC was revealed. He just dropped off a letter at Freedom House in the afternoon before he went to the meeting to AFC to say, oh, it's not just one party I'm meeting or I want to meet with. Now, we're not the AFC. We're a big political party. So I got, if he wants to meet, we are always open to meeting with people too. So I got the executive secretary of the party to write him to say, we're not into PR politics. A photo up in a newspaper. If you want to meet, tell us the purpose of the meeting and what issues you want to discuss. We're a serious party. We don't have time to waste on photo ops only among parties. And so they did have a photo op with AFC. And I saw their joint statement. And the only thing they said in the discussions that ensued, the executive members explored opportunities for collaborative approaches to address critical national issues and challenges facing Guyana today. It's a photo op. We are not into that photo op. Now, the AFC met with APNU in New York, but they didn't put a picture there. They put a picture with ANOG. I wonder why they had to meet in New York. And two, who actually had the meeting? And so then PNC, so AFC met with GAP again, then PNC met with WPA. And I'm thinking about all of this does not matter. For people out there, this is all, let me give you a perspective. So people call me and say, what about these people? They're meeting, they're collating, and all of that. And I say to them, you forget history. Now, not to be arrogant, but in the last elections, APNU was made up of Guyana Action Party, GAP, Justice for All Party, National Democratic Front, National Front Alliance, People's National Congress, were WPA and AFC. That's 7 parties there. Then you had ANOG, LJP, TNM, Change Guyana, People's Republic Party, the Citizen Initiative, URP. 14 parties, and then you had, I think, 2 Fed Up Party, an organization for victory of the people that contested at the regional elections. So you're talking about 16 parties that contested, and the PPP alone, and we won the majority of all the votes compared to 16 parties that contested against us. And it's not arrogance, it's a testimony to our keeping faith with the people of the country, fulfilling our promises. People look back and they saw the 5 years of APNU as an aberration, and that we are working, they needed the PP to come back into office to address their concerns. And since we got back into office, we've been addressing their concerns, and we have grown beyond 2020. We have grown beyond 2020 now. So I say to people, we have had this before. These 1-person's party and 3-person's party and stuff like that, where you can create a party and turn the leader of the party to be the leader of the PPP. This is a serious party. We've had to work many, many years to get up through the ranks and file. Our Congress has more members, more votes. The Congress of the party has more votes, and it's only a representative sample of our membership than most of these parties get together. Some of these parties can't go to elections alone. They can't even meet the requirements to contest. That's why they have to go as a group. So all of this big hype about who meeting whom all week long and to who talking to whom, etc., does not matter. You think the Sharma's Son Party or the I don't know what it's called, or Keith Scott. Keith Scott, nobody don't even know maybe now who Keith Scott is, but he has a party. And the Gap, I don't know who is Gap up to now. They said he's in Parliament. I don't even know the people. So it's not arrogance, it's just that don't waste your time. Don't even worry about it. People call me all the time and say, oh, they're getting together. And I said, but we know this. The useless would flock together. The useless would flock together. They did it before, have nothing to offer the people of the country. But what I heard more is that they're pulling together some money to get Norton out of the way. So we will see how that would evolve, because I think there's a group trying to pull together money, think they can induce Norton to get out the way for another leader to contest the elections. Whether it's Norton or another leader, it doesn't matter. Who they're going to put this? Nigel Hughes, hopeless. In fact, it would be, PP would have a field day on him. I can imagine mounting the platform to talk about him. So this is, so please don't bother me with all of these things. I know a lot of our supporters, every week they contact me, what are these people doing and all of that. Don't worry, we've dealt with this before. And half of them, nobody don't even know about these guys. An hour into the press conference Anouk had, they had 4 members viewing it, and one was my staff. One was my staff, and maybe some other, because I said to them, let me see what they're saying. Make notes. 4 hours into the press conference, or 1 hour into the press conference. So, please, don't bother me too much with these people. The vindictiveness from APNU is unbelievable. And every week they just, when you think they wouldn't go to such a low, they go even beneath that. So So let me deal with something that has been very disgusting that they focus on. Now, you know, the First Lady had a ball recently to raise funds for the many things that she's been doing. Now, the entire APNU cabal said that, first of all, it's taxpayers' money being used to fund the ball, which is a lie. Not a cent of taxpayers' money went to fund the ball. And they sought to disparage not just the First Lady, but the President and all of the people who attended, about the hollowness of the leadership class, the privileged few, that they're sycophants and social climbers and bankrupt, that it's a grotesque display of extravagance and stolen wealth and all kinds of things. So I hope that the people who went there, spend their own money to go there for a cause that is to raise money for charity, that they would see what APNU has called them. And there had people from across the middle class and other groups who wanted to help. So what if in our country people spend their own money and they want to buy a fancy dress and go to a charitable cause or a suit? What's wrong with that? It's these narrow-minded people who sought to disparage everything that the First Lady has done. It's utterly disgusting. It's reprehensible. Now, if you look at some of the initiatives that we're familiar with that the First Lady has been working on. She's working, I'm not going to go into details, but she's working with the government on a joint initiative to get menstrual hygiene products to school kids. Well, children in our schools, in high schools, who are menstruating. It's called the Menstrual Hygiene Initiative. This is a great initiative. The government puts up probably about half of the money, and she, through her charity and her fundraising, comes up with the other half. But this is to help over 30-something thousand people or children in school who need those products, that they don't have to buy them. If they need them, they don't have to pay for them. They should be happy about this. Secondly, she works in the Adopt Orphanage Initiative. They've done work with 15 orphanages already. Thirdly, a program for people living with disability and helping them, assisting them, training, a whole range of stuff, even for housing some of the people, or assisting with housing. Support for the National Beautification Program. So funds come from the government, but they also utilize some of the funds they raise. And then a program to support vulnerable women. These are several initiatives that the First Lady is working on. And you have the APNU people, some of them, the sick ones, who are running down an initiative where not a cent was spent on the ball, but to raise funds. This happens everywhere in the world. People could afford it, buy a ticket, and they know that it's for a good cause. The money goes there, and the money is then spent back on these initiatives. It's not government money, but they begrudge this. They begrudge it, and these are the low lives of our society. And all week they've been talking nonsense about this. It's disgusting, and I think people should stand up to these people. And also said, oh, we spent a lot of money on not giving the public servants the money. The money is going there to fund the ball and not giving it to public servants. I see some of the crazier ones. You see, yeah, I wouldn't even mention their names. I wouldn't even mention their names, but they come mainly from APNU and the AFC. But something is, because I went sick in the stomach when I saw some of these people doing this. And they were in government, and they were busy hustling the money for themselves. In fact, a lot of these initiatives might have been funded from under APNU, from taxpayers. So that's what they think, that in this case it was funded by taxpayers too. So it's something that I wanted to address. So another Starbucks News editorial. Sorry, it's not an editorial. It is a press release from AFC. So the AFC, and Starbucks gives them huge coverage on all this nonsense. So they knew that there was an AGM for the Miners Association yesterday. So I think they're hoping that the timing of their press release and them giving prominent space in the Starbucks News without any fact checking or anything else or quality control. The Starbucks is just the post office. That they would have influenced the miners. So first of all, they said mining sector beset by Dutch disease, says AFC. And I'm still trying to figure out who advised them about this Dutch disease and what they mean, because it is one of the BS or that I've been using. I don't understand how they come up with mining sector beset by Dutch disease. I'm trying to figure out, trying to enter into their minds to see if there's any logic to what they're saying, because I don't want to believe that seemingly sensible people could be so far off the target. So I'm trying to think, what could they mean? Because I've never heard about mining sector beset by Dutch disease. So then down the article, they're talking about lower production, somewhere about production. And I may agree with them that what you've had is a problem with compliance, not necessarily lower production. That some of the people, because of the escalating price for gold and because of when the price goes up, the royalty payments are higher because you have to pay more money, so there's a greater incentive to evade, so that more evasion or some evasion is taking place. And it's not a new phenomenon. Trotman spoke about the evasion in declaration. So I might have agreed with them if they were talking about, people are not complying, and selling all the gold to the gold board that they should be selling. There's some smuggling of that, because I'm aware that the president has been reading the Riot Act to a number of people in the sectors and saying to the miners and others that there are going to be consequences to this for them. So I can understand that, but it's a far stretch of the imagination to link that to the Dutch disease. So I don't know which person advised them, but their big headline, mining sector beset by Dutch disease. So they talk about the terrible scenario and that we reduce the environmental safeguards now in the sector. So they love the miners, but we are allowing the miners to destroy the environment, which is not true. It's nonsensical, and everyone would know this. But I want anyone, they're making a play for the miners again. But the miners are very clear about the lies that they told them in 2050. Miners around the country were told they would remove all the taxes, they would assist the mining sector, they would do a number of things. The miners came out in droves, they brought out their workers from the hinterland to support APNU. I remember the mood in 2015 and what happened. So let me tell you what we had to do when we got back in office. So first thing that APNU did was to increase the tributers tax. They increased their royalty rate. They increased they put the VAT on machinery and equipment, etc. And let me tell you what we did since we got into office, because we made a promise to remove only the taxes, the VAT on machinery and equipment, and a couple of other things. But we did much more. So the miners themselves recognize this. So there was a 10% tributers tax. That is, the miners had to collect from their employees and remit to the treasury. We removed that when we got into office. We reduced the final tax from on a sliding scale of from 3.5% to 2.5%. That's the final tax that APNU had increased. We removed the machinery, VAT on machinery and equipment. We removed the VAT on all-terrain vehicle, ATVs. We removed the VAT on hinterland travel that was affecting the miners. We removed the VAT on the lubricating oil that they used to use. The miners made a case for it. They introduced a system that you had to get police clearance for the miners to transport fuel in their own vehicles. We removed that. We removed the requirement that APNU put in place to register and obtain road licenses for mining equipment. So you had to go, if you had an excavator under APNU, Jordan put that in place. You had to register it for and get a license for it for your excavator deep down in the jungle. And if you didn't have it, and they'll charge you for it. And several other things. Through the IDA, we're now giving more spare parts, some spare parts to the miners, especially for those who declare their goal and the large-scale ones. So all of these things were done under the PPP. Not a word about this. That's their record. They were just devastating the mining sector. The miners know this very well. So you're, shedding crocodile tears over the mining sector now and how the PPP is not treating miners well. You think you're going to fool the miners? And we'll remind them. We'll put it on a flyer and take it into every mining area and share it with every miner about what you did and compare what we did. So don't think you're going to be lying now. Marudi Mountain, you remember what Trotman and the others were doing? They mentioned Marudi Mountain here. Nigel Hughes flew into that area. The whole AFC cabal was there, and they were trying to corruptly give some people and protect people, and the people chased them out. Even now they're chasing them out. They don't want to see them there because they'll remember what they did in government. So that was the last thing that they come out with this week. Beset, mining sector beset by Dutch disease. I don't know. They just had nonsense to talk again this week. And then another Starbuck News editorial about so President Ali has been going into the mining sector. Now the Starbuck News is questioning whether these excursions are really empowering these communities or they remain subject to paternalistic attitudes, still to be determined. So what is paternalistic is the Stabroek editorials, pontificating on everything under the sun, believe that we have to clear it with some class of people. Never mind what you put in your manifesto, never mind what's good for the people on the ground. Never mind in their community they told you, we want black tanks and you buy the black tanks for them, but they must question the efficacy of giving black tanks to them and to question whether we should be sending plastic black tanks there or Navy black tanks into the hinterland. That's the paternalism. And they mentioned the APA, the most paternalistic our organization is the APA, trying to block the funding from the low carbon development strategy that has benefited 242 communities that they themselves have opted into, that they're using to fund large numbers of projects. Who is paternalistic? The president goes, we don't have a cardboard president now, who wouldn't even go into the interior. I remember Granger's trip to the interior. Mabaruma, he goes to central Mabaruma in the morning, plants a tree and come back in the afternoon. 2 hours later. That's it. You find out how many communities he has visited. But the president's visit to the communities now has become a problem for them. This is paternalism. We must now visit. And then they talk about aloof government. So every week, this is what we have to contend with. I'm going to end here. Thank you.
Mr. Jagdeo, then Shabal Damarawaves. Sir, going back to the matter of...
I think it's a bit loud, boy. Yeah, go
okay. on. Going back to the matter of salaries and the amounts you pointed to in terms of increases dating back to 2020, how do you compare that with the purchasing power from then to now? And secondly, does Guyana favor negotiation or arbitration with CGX Frontiera to protect that joint venture interest in the Caribbean bloc? And
what's the second question?
Does the government favor negotiation or arbitration with CGX Frontiera to protect that joint venture's interest in the Caribbean bloc? They said that they've written to the Guyana government seeking to have negotiations, if not eventually arbitration. And can you say what is expected to be the focus of engagements between the government and the British Foreign Secretary?
Huh?
What is expected to be the focus of engagements between the government and the British Foreign Secretary?
British Foreign Secretary?
Yes, and lastly, does the PPP have any of its properties vested in any companies or other entities?
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so first of all, the purchasing power. If you look at the inflationary situation, that's what I'm telling you about average inflation rate. Outside of the cost of a major component, food prices, which we have seen increases in. I've gone through all of the other things. A public servant paying his light bill in 2020 has not seen any rate increase in his light bill. Of course, when the light is on, I must say that, right? But the light bill. A public servant paying a water bill now, in this year, would he see a 5% lower rate than in 2020 in the water bill, because we reduced the water rates by 5%. A public servant having to buy a gallon of gas now or diesel for his or her car would have seen government subsidizing it, so there's no increase, $500 per gallon. A public servant paying for internet now because we have removed the value-added tax and because we have liberalized the telecommunication sector would get 3 times the amount of bandwidth that they and data that they would have gotten in 2020. A public servant paying mortgages now on their property would have seen the same rate or a lower rate than before. So these are key components, and for the whole country. Food prices have moved, and maybe some other consumer durable, but to a lesser extent.
And rent.
Are you factoring rent in your calculations?
Yes, but the thing is that the possibility now of owning your own home, that's why I did not deal with that. As I just told you about that. The $282 billion we'll spend on 50,000 house lots. Under us now, the possibility of owning your own home is far greater than any other time in the past or under APNU. We're building core homes, we're building the young professional homes. We have announced a special incentive for people who are building their own homes, low-income homes, free steel and cement, all of that they can benefit from. So and then on the other hand, there are additional benefits too. So if you had to pay to go to UG in the past, now you will get it free. There is additional benefit to that. If you had a hard time driving, I don't want to go back through the other components that I listed before. So the conditions of your community, etc., has been vastly enhanced. So we're very happy with this, and we're looking at the increase in money annually of $500 million US more to public service workers than in 2020. 500 million US. That's a lot of money more. On CGX, I don't want to speak much on this matter because we have made it clear there is the term for the license expire, and therefore if the term of the license and when they're required to do some or to take some actions under the license that they fail to comply with, then there is no issue to discuss. The license, once its term expired, it's lapsed. If they have a different interpretation, then they can go through the legal process. We believe we have a strong case.
Ignore the letter.
Yeah, we don't have to respond to. You can't negotiate on something that you actually don't have any longer. As far as we're concerned, and the legal advice is that the license lapsed because of the conditions under the license and the timeline for the license itself. So that's our position as of this moment. The PPP properties, 90% of our properties are in our name, or maybe one or so in a company, but they are where the PPP has majority shares in. But where they pay all their taxes to city council and everything else. They two. For example, Gimpex. Gimpex was one of those. So Gimpex has been a PPP holding company for a very long period, and so Gimpex is one of the property. I think only the piece of land on Main Street, on not Main Street, on Regent Street, that is the asset of Gimpex at this time. So we are committed to. But it's interesting that you spoke about this and the APNU's blatant refusal. I saw some engagement Their blatant refusal to discuss MICWAP and the 6.3 billion or 6.6 billion that they owe the City Council, they said that's an internal matter. How could that be an internal matter? You owe the City Council 6.6 billion, and that's an internal matter. I'm telling you what we have based on all of the info. I have to check with the executive secretary, but we ensure that our taxes are all up to date.
And the new guy in the company is still in your part of your party?
Yes, but the majority of the shares there. That's why I said. Those are the two companies. So, yeah.
Good afternoon, Kim King for Reuters. Vice President, can you confirm that the government has received a letter from CGX beginning a 60-day period during which you need to negotiate before you could potentially go to arbitration? CGX said in a release today that it has sent the government a letter.
And our lawyers will deal with that. I have not seen the letter, and our lawyers will deal with that. Yeah.
Has the government...
And you know my views on CGX. I will not repeat those.
Yes.
And we have to check whether they... Anyhow, don't say much more because it might end up in court, but we're not worried about it going to court.
No, well, you've made the comments that you've made in the public realm, but has the government formally communicated to CGX that their license is over and done with?
When your license expires, do you have to get a formal communication from the government? If it says 2 years your license is approved for. If you don't get an approval for extension, that means consistent with the law of the country, it's done. So, but I'm not going to litigate this in the public domain. Our lawyers will deal with that. But CGX has a track record of particular behavior.
Are you happy with the results of the first auction and how things have played out?
I've gone through this 100 times before. I said that it was the first time we went to a public auction, that there were several things at that time that would have, if we had in place, would have probably yielded better results in the auction. And these included a fixed or a new PSA, that's number one. 2, a new Petroleum Activities Act. And 3, seismic studies. You would recall when we went to auction, we made a commitment that in the first 2, we would, in the course, before we finalize the auction, we will make those available to the companies that were going to participate in the auction. It took us a long time, given their complexity, to finalize those 2 seminal pieces of policy, and resulting in us having to postpone or extend the completion of the auction several times. Now these documents are ready. So in the next round that we plan to hold sometime in the future, where these would be available upfront to the companies that want to participate in the auction. And thirdly, since we had gone to the auction with very limited amount of seismic data, we are hoping now, I think we have gone through the process already. We have received bids from several companies that have made proposals to do seismic studies, and then at no cost to the government, and then we share the benefits of the purchase of that data. But that would allow us in the future to go to auctions with a bank of data that would be available to the companies to make more informed decisions as to the potential offshore. And so those three conditions, I think, will help future auctions to get better results.
Okay, and so you don't want to say a general timeline for this auction?
No, we're very conscious that we are going to be approaching elections next year, and let me say, I see this big flurry of activity. They have a whole year more to wait and a long period more. So some people get burnt out too. You know, some of these parties, they jump up a long time as though elections are next 2 months. It's going to be towards the end of next year. But we don't want to undertake. I doubt whether we go to another auction before the elections.
Okay. For 2025, what are your priorities or plans for the oil sector in terms of management, new laws and regulations? And could you give a bit on your view of the performance of the oil sector this year?
So first of all, I'm expecting the AG's department has had some issues. They're overloaded with getting the oil spill legislation, the draft completed so I can table it in the National Assembly. I've been pressing them. They've been very delinquent at this, but been pressing them to get this done because we made certain commitments that we want this tabled before the end of the year. I'm still pressing them to do that. So, but definitely next year, that will be one of the laws that we want to pass. Under the Petroleum Activities Act, there are several regulations that are being drafted, have to be approved, and those two hopefully will be approved by the National Assembly. Now, thirdly, we anticipate that there would be, based on public pronouncements that Exxon has made, that they will request approval for 2 new projects. So those would have to be evaluated, as we said before. When we get the final request in and all the documents in, the evaluation would take place, and an approval or made if the technical people clear the approvals. They are then, what else? We probably, those are the main issues that we'd work on. Oh, monitoring, we'll spend more time on building out the systems for greater monitoring of oil proceeds and all of that, and the production offshore, because that was an issue. Those are, in a nutshell, some of the things that I can think of off the top of my head.
ExxonMobil had said that when it did some maintenance this year, it saw the likelihood that at one of its projects, it could further increase production by 20,000 barrels a day, but it needs to get that go-ahead from the government.
Our technical people are examining that. They are, until they clear it, we are not going to give approval. 2 things they have to look at. First of all, whether it's consistent with the environmental impact assessment that was done at the time of the approval of the project. And secondly, that it's safe to increase the production from the perspective of the rated capacity of the vessel. So those are the two parameters. We have to get assurances from the technical people that those conditions are met before we give approval for those. That's what I spoke the last discussion I had with the minister. We had to assure ourselves of those two those two conditions are met.
Regulation to ensure it's safe and so on. Is the government's policy still that it wants to maximize extraction?
Yes. Well, that is a generic position. That's a generic position. It doesn't. If that's our generic goal, that's the broad position. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do due diligence to ensure that to achieve that outcome, we're not doing it safe. We're not doing it safely, and we have to do it safely. And so, yes, we want to maximize production, but we're not going to do it at the expense of safety or the environment.
Performance of the sector this year and your work managing the oil sector.
I will deal with that at another time, and I suspect the minister should really deal with that. That's his portfolio. I just deal with like more oversight. And by the way, last week I think it was the Kaichur News that asked me about whether Exxon has been written to in relation to the second audit. And so I've seen the letter that went from the minister sometime in November to write Exxon about the audit and its findings. That's the second audit. Which meeting you're talking about? Oh, okay. I'm not briefed about it, but I suspect in these things, at the end of the visit, you will get a chance to talk to him, and Todd will tell you what it's all about. Often these things are about, they're about enhancing our relationship. And we're very pleased that he's here now, comes from Guyanese heritage. It's like second home to him. I shouldn't say that too much, but we're very happy he's here. So you can ask Todd about it.
Dr. Jagdeo Panumanakchan, the Guyana Times. Can you say, is there a timeline for the cash grant registration or government plans?
I explained that at length at the beginning. I don't think you had come here at the time, but look back to that. Yeah, we are hoping that in 5 months that we can complete everyone.
Registration alone, that's what I'm trying to, are you going to do the distribution simultaneously?
Right, simultaneously. So the issue is that, like we did with Region 9, so we completed the registration, the checks are cut now, they do the verification, the checks are cut, they will do the distribution. So that will continue. So as we complete the registration, we would also do a bit of this, right? And
per region?
Per region, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, if that's it.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Nasta Williams, Kaichur News. Just one quick question from me. Other oil-producing countries have implemented windfall tax to benefit their people, and here in Guyana, since Exxon produces 650,000 barrels per day at an average price of $55, everything above this is considered windfall. Using current prices of $72, there's an excess profit of $17 per barrel. And if Guyana moves to demand 75% of this, each of the 3,000 households could have received around $2 million.
What kind of economics we're bringing to me? I don't even understand what you're saying. It's clear that if you have, there's no excess profit on everything else. Your projections are made. You have, on the basis of what you project the oil prices to be, it might be higher. What that means is that with a 75% cost recovery fixed by contract, it means you're amortizing the expenses faster so you can get to a higher share of the profit faster. You're just amortizing the expenses faster. And that's what's happening. So if it took you 10 years to amortize the investment at $50, and just to give an example, price for oil, it may take you 7 years to do it at $75. And that means thereafter, you are entitled to 52%, crudely putting, of their revenue. It's a simple matter. Yes.
Cassie Henry, DPI. Dr. Jagdeo, coming back to the cash grant distribution, I know distribution has begun in Region 9, but can you say specifically when this month we can expect to see it commence for the other regions?
So the next region should be Region 1, and then I think Region 8, and then 4. So, and 7, I think they're doing registration now, and 4. So we are hoping to get all the checks cut in the next few weeks, as many checks as possible, and the distribution started. But as I said to people before, it's not like a straightforward thing. As we register, we'll cut checks, we'll distribute, everyone will get it. It's just a matter of time. So people got to also make sure that we don't do an APNU thing, like that we just want a payout, and then the payout just, the wrong people get money, or they get it twice, and then it becomes the whole exercise becomes blotched in corruption or in misappropriation. We don't want that to happen. We want every Guyanese over 18 to get the money, and we'll provide the opportunities for them to get it. So it's just a matter of timing. Okay, thank you very much.